This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, Bruchim Haba, and welcome everyone. This is our last Agra de Pirkei Shiur before Pesach, and because the Yom Tov is coming and there's so much to talk about, I want to try to share with you two Shiurim today. Before we begin, I want to let everybody know that the new Haggadah came out, Haggadah in English, on the Haggadah Shel Pesach. There's a lot of new information in this that's not in the Sefer in Lashon HaKodesh, and vice versa. The Sefer in Lashon HaKodesh is also, there are many chapters that are on Nisan and Shvi Shel Pesach that are not in this Sefer. So this is available in all the Svarim stores. You can get it at artscroll.com. We're now about a year after the Patira of Rav Chaim Kanievsky. I would like to share with you this morning Divrei Torah from Rav Chaim Kanievsky on the Haggadah Shel Pesach. We're going to call this Shiur Top 10 Divrei Torah of Rav Chaim Kanievsky on the Haggadah Shel Pesach. And these Divrei Torah are culled from no less than 8 different Svarim on Rav Chaim Kanievsky. Because I want to share with you two subjects today, we're going to move through it quickly. So first, 10 exhilarating, electrifying Divrei Torah from Rav Chaim Kanievsky on the Haggadah Shel Pesach. Number 1, we have the simanim of the Seder. Kadesh and Urchatz, Karpas Yachatz. And these are of very early origin. The simanim, either it comes from Rashi or from one of the Balei HaTosfos. And a question you could ask is, why the only siman that has a Vav HaChibur is Urchatz? Kadesh Urchatz. I mean, you could say Kadesh Urchatz, V'karpas, V'yachatz, U'magid, U'rachza, U'moitzimatza, U'mara. Why is the Vav dafka by Urchatz? Right? Good question, no? That's a great question. So, Reb Chaim Kanievsky in the Sefer Siach Sifsoi Seinu, he brings that the meaning of these simanim is, the meaning of the extra vav is, Urchatz needs to be right after Kiddush. Why? Because we have a rule, Kiddush needs to be b'makom Suda. You don't want to interrupt between Kiddush and the Suda. Now, the Suda is going to be in quite a while. Shulchan Aruch is going to be in quite a while. But the beginning of the Suda is already Karpas. Karpas is already the beginning of the Suda. So in order not to be mafsik between the Kadesh and the Suda, so we do Urchatz. Kadesh Urchatz. We immediately wash our hands, so that it should be Kiddush b'makom Suda. You don't want to have an interruption between the Kiddush and the Suda. Again, Karpas is the beginning of the Suda, and therefore it's Kadesh Urchatz. We have a Vav HaChibur by the word Rachatz. Okay, we move on. In Shulchan Aruch, Arov Chaim Siman Taf Ayin Beis, there's a question about whether a woman does Heseiba. In Siman Taf Ayin Beis Sif Daled, it says a woman does not need to do Heseiba unless she's a important woman. So in the times of the Mechaber, not every woman necessarily, the Mechaber is quoting Rishonim, and he's saying not every woman necessarily is chashuv. And the Ramah says all of our women are considered chashuv. Okay, so it's an interesting thing. Somewhere in between the times of the Rishonim and the early Achronim, all women became chashuv. Right nowadays, every bacher in Lakewood is a chashuv bacher, but and all women are chashuv and nashim. But it used to be that not all women were chashuv. When historically, when did this transformation take place that all women became chashuv? So Rav Chaim Kanievsky, aside, he's given the great title. He's called the Sar HaTorah. The Sar HaTorah, the Prince of the Torah, the King of the Torah. Now, it's not easy to be the King of the Torah. You have to have such mastery over the Torah to be a Sar HaTorah. In fact, someone once came to Rav Chaim Kanievsky and he said, I have a hard time remembering learning. So Rav Chaim said, okay, so chazer it 1,000 times. So the person said, is that possible? Chaim Kanievsky said, well, the Shagas Aryeh chazered Shas 613 times. So it's possible. So they asked Reb Chaim, how long does it take to review Shas? Chaim said, to review the whole Shas? The whole Shas? 30 minutes. It takes 30 minutes to review the whole Shas. Now, I assume that means the general principles, but that's somebody who could review the whole Shas in 30 minutes, he could be the Yisar HaTorah. Anyway, Reb Chaim Kanievsky, but aside from his godless in Torah, he did have a sense of humor. He dealt with hundreds of people a day, and in order to be soivel, all kinds of different people, he definitely was able to laugh at human humor. Anyway, Reb Chaim would like to ask riddles, Torah dika riddles that made you think, that made you have it broaden your Yedias HaTorah. So Reb Chaim would ask, when did our women become chashuv? And Reb Chaim answered, from the time of the Cherem, the Rabbeinu Gershom, when Rabbeinu Gershon made a takana, you can't marry two wives. So back in the day when you could have many wives, so women weren't so chashuv. But nowadays, you can only take one wife. Women were upgraded; they became chashuv. Now, in my sefer, so that's what was brought in the sefer Minchas Toida from Reb Chaim Kanievsky. But in the Reb Chaim Kanievsky on Zmiros on page 156, when Reb Chaim posed this riddle of when did women become chashuv, Reb Chaim said from the time of the takana of the Cherem Rabbeinu Gershon, where women were elevated that you can't marry more than one woman, and you can't divorce a woman against her will. That also elevated the status of the woman. So Reb Chaim added that at this historic moment when Rabbeinu Gershon was masakin, you can't marry more than one wife, and you can't divorce her against her will, that is when women became chashuv. Dvar Torah number 3. Echad chacham, v'echad rasha, v'echad tam, v'echad she'eno yedei l'shal. Now the Gra says something very interesting. The Gra says the opposite of chacham is she'eno yedei l'shal. The opposite of a wise person is someone who can't ask. The opposite of a rasha, of a wicked person, is a tam. Someone who is wickedly deceitful and clever, the opposite of that is someone who's wholesome, a tam. So the question is, why do we put the rasha next to the chacham? Why don't we put the tam next to the chacham? And, the rasha, he's wicked, he's a bad guy. Why does he have this domain of chashivos that he gets to be next to the chacham? And Rav Chaim Kanievsky said that the rasha is better than a tam. Why? Because a rasha, at least he could become a chacham. He's wicked, but at least he has the capability to become a chacham. A tam, an amaretz, will never become a tam and chacham, because he doesn't have the intellectual stature to be able to become great. So in other words, a rasha is better off than a tam. A rasha has the opportunity to turn it around. Rav Chaim would point to the Gemara Pesachim that how terrible it is, Chazal say, to marry off your daughter to an Amaretz. Yaakov was nitba, that he didn't give his daughter to Esav, lest his daughter turn Esav around. So think about it. You're not allowed to marry, says Reb Chaim, you're not allowed to marry off your daughter to an Amaretz, but you are commanded to marry your daughter. In other words, you're not allowed to marry your daughter to an Amaretz, but Yaakov Avinu was accountable for not marrying off his daughter to Esav. Yeah, because Esav's not an Amaretz, he's a rasha. A rasha is much better than an Amaretz. Amaretz, chas v'sholem, to marry your daughter to an Amaretz. But to marry your daughter to a rasha, maybe Yaakov Avinu should have, because Dinah would have turned him around. Number 4. So that Dvar Torah came from the Haggadah Shel Pesach Toras Chaim. We move on to Dvar Torah number 4. Arami Oved Avi Vayered Mitzrayma. And then in the Haggadah we have Lavan Bikesh Lakar Es Hakal. We had Arami Oved Avi Vayered Mitzrayma. First of all, where in the world do we find that Lavan tried to destroy all of Klal Yisrael? And what is the juxtaposition of Arami Oved Avi to Vayered Mitzrayma? And Rav Chaim Kanievsky in his Sefer Taima Dekra explains, based on the Sefer Hayashar, at the end of Vayetze, that when Lavan left Yaakov, he sent messengers to Esav, you should destroy Yaakov. So now we see how Lavan wanted to destroy Yaakov. He sent a letter to Esav, go attack Yaakov. So in the Medrash of Parshas Vayishlach, we find that the reason why Esav did not kill Yaakov, why didn't Esav kill Yaakov? Because his men told him, if you're going to kill Yaakov, then you're going to have to pay the debt of Kiger Yia Zaracha. And you're going to have to go down to Mitzrayim. So Esav told Amalek, okay, listen, wait till the Jews go down to Egypt, and only afterwards attack them. Because if you attack them and kill them before, you're going to have to go down to Mitzrayim. So now we understand the juxtaposition. Arami Oved Avi. Arami wanted to kill Yaakov. How? By Esav. And the only reason he didn't is Vayered Mitzrayma. The only reason he didn't is because we had to go down to Mitzrayim, and Esav did not want to have to pay up that obligation. Okay. Dvar Torah number 5. This comes from the Sefer Taima Dekra, Parshas Va'era. Hineni mashliach becha es ha'arov. I will incite against you the wild animals. Rav Chaim wants to know why by all the makos it says the lashon of being a messenger, being sent out. Only by Arov it says shiluach. And the reason is, based on the Gemara in Tainis on Daf Chav Beis, that a wild animal is only considered dangerous unless it's incited. It's a visitation. So therefore, by the Arov, God said, I'm going to incite the wild animals. I'm going to make a visitation upon you. It's a makkah mishulachas. And that's why by all the makkahs, it specifically says mashliach when it comes to the makkah of Arov. Okay? We're going to take a battery timeout. Okay, here we go. Dvar Torah number 6. Rabbi Yehuda hayanoisein bahem simanim. Rabbi Yehuda would give simanim. Simply this means that Rabbi Yehuda gave simanim to the makos in order to remember the makos. In order to remember the order of the makos, because we find in Tehillim that there was a different order. So Rabbi Yehuda would give simanim to help remember the order. Detzach hadash b'yachav. However, the lashon of haya noisein implies that this was not specific to the makos, but this was Rabbi Yehuda's general approach to learning. For example, we find in Menachos Daf Tzadik Vav, by the lechem hapanim, Rabbi Yehuda would give simanim. Rabbi Yehuda would want to differentiate between the lechem hapanim and the shtei halechem. So Rabbi Yehuda would give a siman, for example, in the Haggadah Shel Pesach, Rav Chaim, he brings, Rabbi Yehuda would give a siman so you don't confuse the shtei halechem with the lechem hapanim. The shtei halechem was 4 amos long, 4 amos wide, and the karnoisa were daled, zadad, and Yehu, the lechem hapanim, were 10 by 5 by 7. So this was not something that Rabbi Yehuda did on a one-time basis, but rather Rabbi Yehuda would constantly give simanim. Or the Stipler, give another example, in the Yushalmi it's written that in Adar Sheni you should write shtaros Adar Tinyanan. Rabbi Yehuda said just write a tuf. So this is Rabbi Yehuda l'shitase. Rabbi Yehuda always just gave simanim to help remember and to help jog one's memory and to retain information. Rabbi Yehuda would give simanim. Now, while we're on the subject, I want to share with you, this was something very special about Rav Chaim. In the Sefer B'didi Hava Uvda, he brings an example of Rav Chaim's tremendous bekios. In Masechta Brachos and Daf Chaf Hei Amud Beis, Rashi says, in Brachos Chaf Hei Amud Beis, Lo Yadati, I don't know where it is. So Rabbi Kiva Eger is mitzayin there many, many times where Rashi writes, I don't know where it is. And by the way, that seems like it's the longest Gilya in Shas, the collection that Rabbi Kiva Eger makes of all the places that that Rashi did not know where something is. Isn't that interesting that of all the places that Rabbi Kiva Eger would collect, should be the biggest collection of Rashi's, the largest comment of Rabbi Kiva Eger should be all the places that Rashi said, I don't know where it is. And actually, Rav Chaim himself, in his Gemara, he writes that Rabbi Kiva Eger forgot some places, and there are more places where Rashi says, Lo Yadati. So first of all, you see the great bekias of Rav Chaim Kanievsky, that he came up with instances that are not even mentioned in Rabbi Kiva Eger. But they asked Rav Chaim the following question. They said, what's Rabbi Kiva Eger doing? Why would Rabbi Kiva Eger gather all the places that Rashi says he doesn't know? I mean, is that a worthwhile endeavor to gather all the places where Rashi says he doesn't know? I mean, is that really learning? Is that a worthwhile endeavor? And if Rabbi Kiva Eger is gathering the places, why didn't he gather all the places? And if he didn't, then why did Reb Chaim Kanievsky add other places? So Reb Chaim explained this Indian very beautifully. That the Gemara says in Shabbos Kuf Mem Hei Amud Beis, Habayim Yashreish Yaakov Yatzitzu Farach Yisrael, that these are the Talmidei Chachamim in Bavel, that they make tzitzin ufrachim l'Torah, flowers, designs for the Torah. It's considered a beautification of the Torah if you gather together similar ideas that are found in different places. It's decorative for the Torah. It brings honor and glory to the Torah. And therefore, says Reb Chaim, Rashi says, I don't know, Rabbi Kiva Eger, to beautify the Torah, he gathered together other Mekaimos where Rashi says he doesn't know. Rabbi Kiva Eger didn't mean to gather every single place in Shas that Rashi says he doesn't know. Just what occurred to him at the moment, on the spot, by Mishkal Rishain. And that's where Reb Chaim filled in other examples. But it's considered a kavod to the Torah, a beautification for the Torah, of why to gather together even ideas that are not perhaps the most critical ideas, even as perhaps mundane as places where Rashi says, I don't know, gathering together similar ideas is decorative for the Torah. Now, once we're on the topic, it is well known that once we're on the topic of Ditzach Hadash Biachav and Rashi Tevois, we know that Reb Chaim Kanievsky very often would bless people b'ketziras ha'omer, meaning in a very abbreviated way, he would say buha, standing for bracha v'hatzlacha. And it was sort of mysterious why Reb Chaim would do that. And in the Haggadah Shel Pesach, Toras Chaim, he brings from the Sefer Minchas Toida that the reason Reb Chaim did that is based on the Sefer Chasidim. Sefer Chasidim says it is decreed on a person how many footsteps he will take in his lifetime, how many words he will speak, and nevertheless, so Reb Chaim would say boha, so to speak, to condense, to make his words more abbreviated. After all, he would have to be mavarich hundreds of people a day, and this way he would save his words. This is one of the ideas mentioned of why Reb Chaim would say buha. Actually, just yesterday, someone suggested to me a different reason. My father suggested to me another reason, based on a Maisa Shahaya. Actually, it's a interesting Maisa. The Maisa is like this. So, people came over to purchase the Haggadah, and if I have time, they want me to write something in it. So, okay, I write some nice words in it, some Divrei, good wishes. After all, every Jew has the capacity. Hashem told Abraham, "Va'avarcha mevarchecha." Anyone is able to bless another Jew. Anyway, sometimes people come and I have to go to Mincha or I have to go to Marav. There's not so much time, and sometimes there's more time. So not all the wishes are the same. Not always am I able to write something. Anyway, two people were sitting next to each other in shul. One guy opened up his Haggadah and he had a very abbreviated bracha. The other guy opens up his Haggadah and he had a whole Megillah. He had a whole long bracha. And the other guy had Chalisha Sadas, that he doesn't have a nice bracha. So my father said, well, that's why Rav Chaim tells everybody the same thing. Everyone gets the same bracha, buha. Nobody feels bad. Nobody. Ha'ashir lo yarbev hadal lo yamit. Mi bracha mi boha. That's the takana. This way there's no kina, there's no sacharis, and there's shalom al Yisrael. Anyway, but perhaps there are other cheshbonos that Reb Chaim had. Let's move on in the Divrei Torah. In the Haggadah we say ve'alayam laku chamisha makas. On the Yam, they got 50 makas. It doesn't say in the Torah the 50 makas al hayam. Why doesn't it say? Why isn't it not mefurash in the Torah that there were 50 makas on the Yam? It doesn't say about the makas on the Yam at all. And Reb Chaim would say that the ones that were in the Yam, Bnei Yisrael did not see, and the Mitzrayim were drowned, and there's nobody to relay the makos. So in other words, Reb Chaim is saying that the makos al hayam, Bnei Yisrael didn't see, and the Mitzrayim drowned, and nobody could speak about it. So the question is, well, what exactly does this mean? So in the Haggadah Shel Pesach Toras Chaim, it's elaborated further. Reb Chaim would say like this: we know there's a principle, and this is something we spoke about many times, that anything that is explicit in the Torah, since the Torah is the blueprint of creation, will be outright and blatant in the world. That's the reason Rav Aaron Kotler would say why Olam Haba is not mentioned in the Chumash, because then we would be able to see Olam Haba. And Ayin lo ra'asa Elokim zulasecha, Hashem doesn't want us to be able to see Olam Haba. However, so anything in the Torah Shebachsav is out in the open. Anything that's not written explicitly is not readily apparent. Therefore, the Eser Makos, which were apparent and outright and blatant, the Torah writes explicitly. The 50 Makos that were only b'toich hayam and were not really seen, only the Mitzrayim who drowned, they were only written in the Torah b'derech remez. Okay, Dvar Torah number 8. And this is very interesting because we're learning Ksubas now, Perek Elo Naros, and one of the main themes of Elo Naros is Kimle b'derab minei, Eino loikeo meshalem, Eino mesu meshalem, that Misa or Einshem pater you for monetary payment. So the Parshas Drachim asks a famous question, that how could HaKadosh Baruch Hu be done the Mitzrayim with Misa and Mamain, but we hold Ein Adam Mesu Meshalem. You don't die and pay. In fact, Tosfos in the 5th parak of Maseches Avodah Zarah, Daf Ayin Aleph Amud Beis, Tosfos writes that even by Bnei Noach we say Kimle b'derab minei. So since the Mitzrayim were Neschayev Misa, how could they be Chayev Mamain? What's Pshat in the Bizas Hayam? Once the Mitzrayim died, so they shouldn't have to make monetary payment as well. So in the Derech Sicha, they asked Reb Chaim this question of the Parshas Drachim, and he says that from the Gemara in Sanhedrin, it's Mevuar, that the monetary payment, the Bizas Mitzrayim and the Bizas Hayam, was not monetary payment, but that was rather the money they owed for our workload. They owed us wages for our work. In fact, in the Haggadah shel Pesach, Rav Chaim, he brings, in the Haggadah shel Pesach, Rav Chaim, he brings that the Gemara in Sanhedrin says that one time the Egyptians came many hundreds of years later to a court case before Alexandros Mogdan. So they said, Alexander, the Jews borrowed all our gold, silver, and wealth, and they never paid us back. Give it back to us. So Gavia ben Pesisa said to the rabbis, I want to fight with those Egyptians. If they beat me, so big deal, they beat a simpleton. If I am victorious over them, then you could say that the Torah defeated them. So they allowed Gavia ben Pesisa to adjudicate with the Egyptians, and he said, where are you bringing a raya from that we took your money? From the Torah? I'll bring you a raya from the Torah. You made 600,000 Jews work for 430 years. Pay up. So Alexander said to the Egyptians, good taina. What do you say to that? They said, give us 3 days. They ran away, they never came back. By the way, the Chidah asks on that Gemara, what do you mean 600,000 Jews worked for 430 years? We only worked in Egypt a fraction of that amount of time. It wasn't 430 years. So the Chidah says, actually, we worked for 86 years. The actual labor was 86 years, 1/5 of 430. And actually, 600,000 Jews did not work. It was 600,000 Jews is 1/5. 3 million Jews worked. So the numbers are accurate. 600,000 Jews worked for 430 years, meaning 86, 86, 86, 86. Because 600,000 is a fifth, meaning 600,000 working for 430 is the equivalent of 3 million working for 86. Okay, Marv Rabbi said, and therefore, since it's wages and not monetary payment, therefore we do not apply the rule of Kimle B'derabba Minei. Okay, Dvar Torah number 9. We say in the Haggadah, Ad Niglu Aleim Melech Malchei Hamlachim. The king, who's the king of kings. So we just sort of take this phrase for granted. God's the king of all kings. You have King Henry, King Charles, and God is the king over all of them. But it says he's the king over the kings over kings. So who are the 3 kings? Who are the other 2 kings besides God? So Rav Chaim Kanievsky said very pashat. He's the king of kings. Who are the king of kings? Those who rule over the world. So there are 2 different ways of saying this. In the Sefer Haggadah shel Pesach Rav Chaim, they quote Rab Chaim in Siach Sifsoisenu as saying something that he doesn't say, but actually I think it's even better than what's brought. Namely, there were kings in the world, and then there were super kings. There were kings who ruled over the whole Kippa, Achav, Achashverosh, Nebuchadnezzar. And Tosha says, what about Alexandros? And no, we don't count him. So there were regular kings, King Henry, King George, King Louis, and then there were king over kings, Achav, Achashverosh, Nebuchadnezzar, and God is the king who rules over the kings, the king of kings. But Rav Chaim also, it's attributed, based on the Gemara in Chagiga, that the king of animals is the lion, the king of behemoths is the ox, the king of birds is the eagle, and man is misgah over them, and God is misgah over man. So therefore, God is the king over the king of kings. God is the king over man, who's the king over the Ari, the Shar, and the Neshar. And finally, there's a very interesting stira we find in the Haggadah. At the end of Magid we say, Lefikach anachnu chayavim lahoidos lahalel l'shabeach l'mi sha'asa la'avoseinu v'lanu. We say God who made miracles for our forefathers and for us. First we mention our forefathers, then us. And then right after, in Asher Ga'alanu, we say, Asher Ga'alanu v'Ga'alas Avoseinu. He redeemed us, and He redeemed our forefathers. We say us, and then our forefathers. So this is the stira of the Masanisim, the Baal Nesivos HaMishpat. Why first do we mention our forefathers and then us, and then we say us and then our forefathers? So he says very important, very important. Regarding miracles, where the miracles of Egypt were the most chashuv, and there never will be like them again, and they're the root of all miracles, therefore we say our forefathers and then us. But regarding the Geula means kinyan, the fact that God took us and acquired us to be His people, so vis-a-vis us, we are the main beneficiary, and then we mention our forefathers as well. So regarding the miracles, our forefathers comes first. Regarding the Geula, the kinyan, God's acquisition of us, then we are primary. However, Rav Chaim Kanievsky also discussed this question, and we can answer based on the idea that Chayav Adam Liras Es Atzmai Ki'ilu Hu Yatsa Mitzrayim. So in the Bracha Asher Ga'alanu, when we're talking about tonight that we're fulfilling mitzvahs, Higiyanu Lechol, so we're talking about the mitzvahs, and we're obligated to view that we ourselves left, so we mention ourselves first. But regarding stam thanking of Hashem, so first we mention our forefathers, and then we mention ourselves. So these are 10 Divrei Torah from Rav Chaim Kanievsky, called from 8 different svarim. Number 1, Siach Sifsoiseinu. Number 2, Minchas Toida. Number 3, Rav Chaim Kanievsky on Zmiros. Number 4, Haggadah Toras Chaim. Number 5, Taima Dekra. Number 6, Siach HaPesach. Number 7, B'didi Have Oved. Number 8, Derech Sicha. These are 10 Divrei Torah called from 8 different svarim of Rav Chaim Kanievsky. So this is our first shiur. I do want to have another short shiur with you, if you could hang in there a few more moments. Okay, I'm just going to change this battery, and then we'll be ready. Okay, 1 second, I'm just getting the sefer. I'm not sure.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.